The twin suns were setting over the alien city, their golden and violet light mixing on the broken streets. Dust floated in the air, catching the light like tiny fireflies. A small alien girl stood alone on the corner, holding a box full of old toys, her thin hands shaking from cold. She was no more than 10 years old, with gray-blue skin and bright silver eyes that still held a spark of hope. Around her, tall creatures walked past without looking, their faces hidden under metal masks and glowing robes. No one cared about a little girl trying to sell junk on a dying street. Then a man appeared, a human, tall and broad, his clothes covered in oil and soot, a worker's badge hanging from his chest. His name was Ethan, a mechanic from the human district. He had been walking home after a long day fixing cargo shuttles when he heard a weak voice say, "Please, human, take my toys. I need money to buy medicine for my mother." Ethan stopped, the sound of her voice cutting through the noise of the street. He looked down and saw her holding up a broken little robot toy, its arm missing, its head cracked. Her big silver eyes looked at him with fear and hope mixed together. For a moment he thought she was begging like the others, but something in her tone was different. It was not greed, it was desperation. He knelt down and picked up the toy, turning it in his hand. The tiny robot's chest blinked once with a weak blue light. "This thing's still got a power core," he said softly. The girl nodded. "My father built them before he died. I just fix and sell them now." Her voice cracked on the last words. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He had seen poverty before, but this was worse. He asked, "Where's your mother now?" The girl pointed down the narrow alley filled with smoke and rusted pipes. "She's sick. The doctor said we need special medicine from the upper city. But it's too expensive." Ethan looked at her small box of toys, 5, maybe 6, each handmade from metal scraps and wires. He could tell her father had been a real craftsman. The toys were old but clever, designed with love. Ethan pulled a few credits from his pocket and handed them to her. "Keep the toys," he said, "buy the medicine," but the girl shook her head. "No, please, you have to take one. I can't take money for nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed strong. Ethan sighed and picked one, a small flying disc with tiny wings. He smiled. "All right, deal." The girl bowed slightly. Alien style, her voice soft. "Thank you." "Human?" As Ethan walked away, he turned the disc in his hand. It was strange, too advanced for a simple toy. He noticed small runes carved on its side. It looked like it could almost fly. A chill ran through him. He turned back to look at the girl, but she had already disappeared into the dark alley. Something about that street felt wrong now. The people who had ignored her before were watching him, silent. He hurried away, holding the strange toy close. Later that night, Ethan sat in his small workshop. The city outside buzzed with the sound of airships and holographic ads. He placed the toy on his desk and tried to power it up. The disc floated for a moment, humming softly. Then a small blue spark shot out and formed a faint projection. A map? A code? Ethan leaned closer, his heart pounding. He couldn't make sense of it, but it looked military, not childlike. He rubbed his eyes, muttering, "What the hell did I just buy from that girl?" Then he heard a knock at the door. Slow and heavy, he froze. No one ever visited him this late. He looked through the small glass panel. Outside stood a shadowy figure wearing a long black coat with glowing green eyes under the hood. Ethan quietly slipped the toy into his pocket and opened the door halfway. "Yes? Can I help you?" he asked, trying to sound calm. The figure's voice was deep, metallic. "You bought something from a girl tonight, return it." Ethan frowned. "Who are you talking about?" The man's hand moved slightly, metal fingers clicking. "The one selling toys on 14th Street? Ethan's pulse quickened. He said, "It's just a toy," but the figure's glowing eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind giving it back?" Ethan forced a nervous laugh. "Sure, I'll find it later." But when he blinked, the figure was gone, vanished into thin air. Leaving only a faint humming sound, Ethan locked his door. He turned off the lights and sat in the dark. Staring at the glowing disc on his desk, he didn't know who that man was. He didn't know why a child's toy carried a secret code. But one thing was clear. The little alien girl was in danger, and now so was he outside. Under the fading light of 2 suns, the city slept. But deep in the alley where the girl lived, more shadows moved, whispering his name. Ethan had no idea that his life had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The next morning, the twin suns rose slowly over the alien city, their rays cutting through the thick clouds of smoke and neon haze. Ethan hadn't slept all night. He kept staring at the strange toy on his work table, the little disc that had glowed with something more than light every time he touched it. It hummed softly like it was alive, like it was waiting. He knew he should forget the girl and throw the toy away, but his heart didn't let him. He couldn't forget her silver eyes, her trembling hands, and the fear in her voice when she said she needed medicine for her mother. So he grabbed his jacket, pocketed the toy, and walked back to the same broken street. The morning market was noisy, full of traders yelling, strange music and alien smells, but the corner where the girl had stood was empty. Only a few scattered wires and a cracked toy wheel remained on the ground. He asked a nearby vendor, "The little alien girl who sells toys, have you seen her?" The vendor, an old reptilian creature with cloudy eyes, spat and said, "If she's smart, she's gone. The syndicate doesn't like competition." Ethan frowned. Syndicate? The vendor just shook his head. "Walk away, human. This part of the city eats people like you." But Ethan didn't walk away. He went deeper into the narrow alleys. The air growing colder, darker. Pipes dripped. Walls buzzed with old energy lines. He followed the faint sound of a child coughing, and finally saw her, a small shape sitting beside a half-open door. It was Lyra, the same alien girl. Her face pale, her hands stained with dust. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "You came back." Ethan smiled gently, kneeling beside her. "I said I would." She tried to smile, but her voice broke. "Mother's worse. The medicine man said she needs a new dose. But I don't have enough credits." Ethan looked inside the house. It wasn't really a house. Just metal sheets welded together, a bed made from old cargo fabric, and a small heater flickering weakly. On the bed lay Lyra's mother, breathing slow, her skin almost translucent. Ethan felt anger rise in him. No one deserved to live like this. He checked the heater, fixed its wiring with his tools, and handed Lyra some food from his bag as they ate. She told him stories about her father, who was once an engineer for the energy mines, about how he died when the syndicate took over. "He used to make toys for me," she said, touching one of the broken ones. "Now I make them for others, to survive." Ethan looked around and noticed something odd. The toys weren't just toys, they were built with high-precision microcircuits, energy cells, even fragments of rare metals. He asked softly, "Lyra, where do you find these parts?" She blinked. "In the junkyard, sometimes from old soldiers' scrap." But Ethan knew better. These weren't junk parts, they were stolen tech. And that meant someone was using this child to move illegal material without her even knowing it. Suddenly, the door creaked open behind them. Two tall alien men stepped in, their faces hidden under gray hoods marked with glowing red symbols. Their voices were cold. "The human mechanic, how kind of you to visit." Ethan stood up. Tense. "Who are you?" "Collectors," one of them said, smiling with sharp teeth. "This district belongs to the syndicate, and that girl owes debt." Lyra hid behind Ethan, shaking. "They took everything. Even father's tools," the man chuckled. "Debts must be paid." Ethan's eyes hardened. "She's a child," the second man sneered. "Not our problem." Before they could reach Lyra, Ethan grabbed a wrench from his belt and slammed it against the first man's arm. The alien roared in pain, his weapon clattering to the floor. Ethan pushed Lyra behind him, shouting, "Run!" But the second man hit Ethan hard, throwing him against the wall, sparks flying from the broken pipe. Lyra screamed, "Stop!" and threw one of her toys, a small round one. It hit the floor and exploded in a flash of light. The men stumbled back, blinded for a second, and that was enough for Ethan to grab Lyra and pull her out through a side door. They ran through the maze of tunnels until they reached a broken bridge over a polluted river. Ethan gasped for air, holding his side. "Who were they?" Lyra's eyes were wet. "They come every week. They say I have to pay or they'll take me away." Ethan clenched his fists. "Not anymore." He took the strange disc toy out of his pocket and showed her. "Lyra, this thing, it's not just a toy. It's something important." Her eyes widened. "You mean Father's work?" He nodded. "Maybe it holds a secret, something those men are after." As they spoke, a shadow moved behind the smoke across the bridge. Someone was watching, recording their faces, sending the data to someone far away. Ethan didn't notice it, but a deep voice echoed through a hidden comm link. "The human knows too much. Mark him for retrieval." Lyra looked up at him, whispering, "Are you going to leave us now?" Ethan crouched, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, kid, I'm going to fix this." He looked toward the upper city where the Rich lived under shining domes. Then back toward the slums filled with fire and hunger. Your mother needs that medicine, he said, and I'll get it. No matter who I have to fight. The girl stared at him, her eyes wide and shining under the red light of the lower sun. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever promised to stay. As they walked back to her home, a faint metallic drone hovered above, following them quietly and deep in the city's core. Someone whispered his name. Ethan, the voice said. The human has chosen his side. The next night would bring fire, betrayal, and blood. But for now, in that dark corner of the alien slums, hope flickered again like a small blue light, refusing to die. Night came quickly over the alien city, the twin suns sinking behind towers of glass and steel. Ethan sat in his workshop, lights flickering as power surged from the cheap district grid. He kept checking the window, half expecting someone to break in. The toy sat on his desk, silent, but glowing faintly blue like a heartbeat. He didn't know what to do next, but deep down he felt something terrible was coming. Suddenly the workshop door hissed open. A tall figure stepped inside without knocking. He was an alien, broad-shouldered, skin like black iron, eyes burning red beneath a hood. His voice was deep, calm and cold. You are Ethan. The human mechanic. Ethan froze, his hand moving toward his wrench. Who's asking? The man smiled faintly, showing sharp metallic teeth. My name is Core. I work for the syndicate. Ethan's heart pounded. I don't owe your syndicate anything. Core took another step forward, his boots making dull thuds on the metal floor. Perhaps not. But you took something that belongs to us, Ethan frowned. A toy? That little girl's toy. Core's expression didn't change. It's not a toy, it's a key. And you don't understand the danger you're in. Ethan clenched his jaw. Then explain. But Core only tilted his head. Return it, and I will forget you ever existed. Ethan laughed quietly. That's not how this works, is it? Core's eyes narrowed. You're brave for a mechanic, but bravery won't save you from what's coming. Without another word, Core turned and left, the door sliding shut behind him. The silence that followed was worse than the threat. Ethan sat still, thinking. He didn't know what that disc was, but now he knew it was worth killing for. The next morning, Ethan went back to Lyra's shelter, but the place was empty. The metal walls were torn apart. The bed overturned. He called her name, Lyra, Lyra, but only echoes answered. Then he saw a mark burned into the wall, a red circle with 3 slashes. The syndicate's symbol. He fell to his knees, anger and guilt twisting in his chest. They had taken her, maybe worse. He picked up a small broken toy lying near the door. Her little voice echoed in his memory. Take my toys, human. I need money to buy medicine for my mother. He whispered to himself. I'm not letting them take you too. He raced back to his workshop, activated the toy disc again. It projected faint lines of symbols in the air, forming coordinates deep under the city's industrial zone. He packed his tools, grabbed his old plasma torch, and followed the map. Every step down the tunnels brought colder air, stranger sounds, and dim red lights that blinked like eyes. He finally reached a huge metal gate, guarded by 2 syndicate soldiers. Ethan hid behind a broken generator, his mind racing. He spotted a pile of scrap bots nearby, small service drones with half-functioning energy cells. He quickly rewired one, attaching a power pack to its motor. When it buzzed to life, he sent it rolling toward the guards. The small explosion it made wasn't strong, but it was loud enough to distract them. Ethan used that moment to slip inside. The underground base stretched like a maze, pipes, flickering lights, and the stench of oil. In one of the chambers, he found cages. Inside one of them sat Lyra, bruised and trembling but alive. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw him. You came back, Ethan grinned weakly. Didn't I promise? He cut the lock open with his torch. We're getting out of here. But before they could escape, a voice echoed through the hall. Leaving so soon? Core stepped out from the shadows, holding a glowing baton. Lyra screamed, Run! But Ethan stood in front of her. Core's voice was steady. You think you can protect her? You don't even know who she is. Ethan gritted his teeth. She's a kid who needs help, that's enough for me. Core smiled coldly. Her father wasn't just an engineer, he was one of ours. A syndicate scientist. He stole our energy core before he died. He pointed at the toy disc in Ethan's hand. That's the core, human. That's what you're risking your life for. Ethan looked at Lyra in shock. Your father? She shook her head, crying. He said he was building something to make people free. Kor's voice grew sharper. He built a weapon and you're carrying the last piece. Before Kor could move, Ethan threw one of Lyra's broken toys at the ceiling. It exploded into sparks, cutting the power for a few seconds. He grabbed Lyra and ran through the emergency tunnels, the walls glowing with red alarms. Behind them, Kor's voice echoed. You can't hide forever, human. She belongs to us. They burst out into the lower city, running until the sounds of sirens faded. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted. Ethan knelt beside her. We need to get far from here. She held the disc tightly, whispering. Father said, if anything happens, follow the light. The disc glowed, projecting a new set of coordinates. Far away, somewhere beyond the planet, Ethan looked at the stars above the polluted sky. He knew what it meant. They'd have to leave this world. But he also knew Kor would follow them. Still, he placed a hand on her shoulder and said, Then we follow the light, above them, unseen. A syndicate drone recorded everything and sent the footage to Kor's command ship. The alien commander watched the screen. His expression unreadable, he whispered to himself. Run as far as you want, human. The galaxy is smaller than you think. The game between them had just begun, and neither side would stop until the last secret of the toy was revealed. Smoke curled above the city skyline as the suns began to fade. The air smelled of metal and heat, and the lower district buzzed with nervous voices. Ethan knew something was wrong the moment he saw the sky turning red. Not from sunset, but from fire. The syndicate had moved faster than he expected. And now the whole market near Lyra's street was burning. He ran through the crowd, pushing past terrified aliens fleeing with whatever they could carry. Screams echoed as drones fired beams of light into buildings. Turning steel into molten rivers, Ethan shouted, Lyra, stay close! The little alien girl ran behind him, clutching her box of toys. Her eyes wide with fear. Everywhere she looked, she saw flames eating the home she once knew. They ducked under a fallen beam and crawled through the narrow space between walls when they came out. The slums were gone, just smoke, broken glass, and people crying for lost family. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand tighter, his heart racing. We have to find your mother, he said. Lyra nodded, tears mixing with the dust on her face. She was at home. Please hurry. They ran through the maze of burning alleys until they reached the small shelter. Half of it had already collapsed. Lyra's mother lay inside, weak and coughing. Surrounded by the orange glow of fire, Ethan rushed in, covering his mouth with his sleeve. He lifted the debris from her legs while Lyra cried beside her. Mom, we're here, we're here. The woman's eyes fluttered open, faint but full of love. Lyra, my star. Ethan lifted her in his arms, trying to carry her out. But the ceiling cracked and a piece of metal fell, slicing across his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Outside, the firestorm roared louder. Drones hovered overhead, scanning survivors, searching for something or someone. Then a familiar voice echoed through the chaos. Ethan, you shouldn't have come back. It was Kor, standing atop a pile of rubble, his armor glowing under the burning sky. Behind him were syndicate soldiers armed with shock rifles. Lyra screamed, You did this. Kor's cold voice carried over the flames. Collateral damage, little one. Your father's crimes brought this on your people. Ethan set the woman down and stood between them, blood running from his shoulder. You killed innocent people just to find a child. Kor tilted his head. That child holds the key to power greater than you understand. He pointed at the toy disc hanging from Ethan's belt. Give it to me and maybe I'll let you live. Ethan's voice was rough but steady. You'll have to take it from me, Kor smirked. That can be arranged. He raised his hand and signaled his soldiers. Energy bolts ripped through the smoke, exploding walls and sending fire everywhere. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand and ran behind the remains of an old market stall. He threw one of her small toys, a floating ball, into the air. It burst into a blinding flash. Scattering the drones long enough for them to move. Go! Ethan shouted, pushing Lyra toward the alley. She hesitated, looking back at her mother, but before she could reach her, the woman coughed weakly and smiled. Go, my child. Your father's work. Protect it. A moment later, the roof came down, sealing the room in fire. Lyra screamed, falling to her knees, but Ethan pulled her up, his face grim. We can't stay. She wanted you safe. They ran through the ruins. Chased by syndicate troops, Ethan fired a plasma cutter at the fuel pipes, creating a wall of fire behind them. They jumped over shattered platforms, climbed through pipes, and finally reached the old transit tunnels. The heat from the fires followed them like a beast. Lyra could barely breathe, her voice breaking. Why are they doing this? Ethan didn't answer, his jaw tight. He knew Core wasn't just after power. He was after control. And Lyra was the last piece of something her father had built. At last they reached an old hangar under the slums. Ethan forced open the door with his wrench, revealing an old, half-rusted ship under a sheet of dust. "This was my transport," he said, coughing. "I used it years ago when I still worked off-world." Lyra stared at the ship. "Can it still fly?" He smiled faintly. Only one way to find out. As they powered up the systems, the toy disc on his belt began to glow again. A hologram flickered in front of them. A man's voice, calm and full of static. "Lyra, my little star, if you're seeing this, it means I'm gone," Lyra gasped. "Father," the hologram continued, "the Syndicate will stop at nothing to control the core. But it's not just power, it's life, it's freedom. Don't let them have it." Then the image faded, leaving silence. Ethan turned to Lyra. "Your father built this thing to change everything, didn't he?" She nodded, trembling. "He said it could heal whole worlds. But they wanted to use it as a weapon." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we'll finish what he started." As the engines roared to life, the floor trembled. Outside, Core's soldiers had tracked their heat signature. Ethan shouted, "Hold on!" and pulled the controls. The ship lifted just as the Syndicate troops burst in. Firing wildly, flames erupted behind them as they shot into the sky. Breaking through the smoke, Lyra looked down at the burning city that had been her home. Tears fell down her cheeks as she whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." The stars opened above them, endless and cold, but far behind on a Syndicate command ship. Core watched their escape on a holographic screen. His red eyes narrowed. "Let them run," he said softly. "It makes the hunt more interesting." Ethan didn't know it yet, but escaping the city was only the beginning. The Syndicate had marked him as a traitor, and in the black void between stars, the next move in their deadly game had already begun. The stars stretched like rivers of silver outside the ship's cracked window. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, her small hands holding the glowing disk close to her chest. She hadn't spoken since they left the burning city. Her eyes were empty, her face pale, but inside, something stronger was beginning to wake, a spark. Ethan watched her from the pilot's chair, the soft hum of the old engine filling the silence. He had patched his bleeding shoulder with a strip of cloth, his hands shaking as he typed commands into the flight console. The old ship was barely holding together, wires sparking, fuel leaking, but for now, it was flying, he whispered to himself. "You did it, old man." Then he glanced at Lyra. "We're safe. For now." She looked up slowly, her voice small. "You shouldn't have saved me." Ethan frowned. "What kind of talk is that?" "They'll come for you now," she said, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The Syndicate never stops." Ethan smiled faintly, a tired, human smile. "I've dealt with worse than bullies in shiny armor." Lyra tilted her head. "Were you a soldier?" He nodded slowly. "Long time ago. During the border wars, I flew for the Terran fleet. Thought I could make a difference. But all I found was fire and loss." He stared out at the stars. "When the war ended, I came here to fix machines instead of breaking them." Lyra hugged her knees, whispering, "And now you're saving people again." Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe I never stopped trying." The ship trembled as a proximity alarm beeped. Ethan leaned forward, checking the radar. No way. They found us already. Outside, 2 Syndicate drones appeared, sleek and silver, firing blue tracking beams that cut across the void. Ethan cursed under his breath and pulled the ship into a dive. "Hold on," he shouted, twisting the controls. The old thrusters groaned, throwing them against their seats as the ship rolled through a field of asteroids. Energy blasts followed, lighting up the rocks like fireworks. Lyra screamed, "They're too fast!" Ethan grinned through gritted teeth. "Not faster than me." He weaved between the massive stones. The hull scraping sparks, a drone fired again, missing by inches. Ethan slammed a lever and released an emergency fuel tank. The tank exploded, taking one of the drones with it. The other drone stayed close, relentless, Ethan muttered. "Persistent little thing," and reached under the control board, pulling out one of Lyra's toys. It was a small flying sphere, still half broken. "Can this thing still work?" he asked. Lyra wiped her tears and nodded. "It can blind scanners. For a few seconds, and that's all I need," Ethan said, tossing it into the rear hatch. He hit the release button. The toy drifted into space, then burst with a pulse of bright white light. The drone's sensors went blind, spinning in confusion. Ethan used the moment to fire the ship's last thruster burst. They shot past the asteroid belt and disappeared into the dark. When it was over, both of them sat in silence. Breathing hard, Lyra whispered. "You're crazy." Ethan laughed weakly. "Maybe, but we're alive. And that counts for something." They drifted for hours in the quiet void until the stars thinned and the holographic map flickered again. The disk glowed brighter, showing new coordinates, Lyra pointed. "That's the place Father spoke about." "The old rebel base," Ethan frowned. "You sure? It looks like it's in the middle of nowhere." She nodded. "He said it's hidden under an abandoned moon. The rebels called it Sanctuary." Ethan leaned back, sighing. A moon called Sanctuary. Sounds like hope. As the ship approached the coordinates, a small gray moon appeared, its surface full of scars and craters. Ethan guided the ship toward a faint light blinking near one crater. When they landed, the engines hissed and the ramp lowered with a metallic groan. Cold air swept in, sharp and thin. They stepped outside, Ethan with his torch, Lyra holding the disc close. The place was silent except for the sound of wind and old metal creaking. Then the ground beneath them shimmered. A cloaking field faded, revealing a massive underground base hidden under the dust. Doors opened. Lights flickered to life one by one. Lyra gasped. Father was here. Ethan walked forward, looking at the symbols on the walls. Rebel insignias, half-burned messages, and old banners that said freedom through unity. They reached a control room filled with old machines. Ethan brushed dust from a console and powered it on. A hologram flickered, a message file labeled Project Dawnlight. He opened it and the voice of Lyra's father filled the room. "If you're hearing this, then the Syndicate still controls the system, but there is still a way to stop them. The core must be taken to the heart of the rebel network, where it can awaken the Code of Liberation." Ethan frowned. "Code of Liberation?" Lyra's eyes widened. "It's not just a weapon. It's something that can break their control signals." Before they could play more, the radar alarm beeped again. A transmission came through, full of static. Core's voice echoed coldly. "Did you really think you could hide, human?" Ethan's blood froze. "How did he—" Core laughed. "You led me right to the rebel base, and now I'll bury you in it." Outside, Syndicate ships descended through the clouds of dust, weapons charging. Ethan looked at Lyra. "No running this time," she looked terrified. "What do we do?" He smiled faintly, his eyes hard. "We fight, but not to kill, to buy time for hope." He turned to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your father believed in something bigger. Now it's our turn." Lyra looked up at him, tears shimmering. "You'll get hurt again." He laughed softly. "That's what humans do best, kid. We get hurt, and we keep going." He took his old plasma torch, rewired the generator, and set up defenses around the base. For the first time, Lyra didn't see a tired mechanic. She saw a soldier, a protector, someone unbroken outside. Thunder rumbled as Syndicate ships began to land. Ethan looked toward the stars and whispered, "I promised your mother I'd keep you safe. I'm not breaking that promise now." The base lights flickered, the walls shook, and the war for one child and one small glowing toy was about to begin. The cold moon trembled under the sound of thunder that wasn't from the sky, but from ships landing above it. Ethan watched from the old rebel base as Syndicate dropships cut through the clouds, their engines howling like beasts. Each ship carried dozens of soldiers, metal-armored, faceless, and armed with pulse rifles that glowed red in the dark. Lyra stood beside him, holding the disc close, her small hands shaking but her eyes bright. The room shook as the first missile struck the surface, dust falling from the ceiling like snow. Ethan's voice was calm but steady. "They've found us, but that doesn't mean they win." He turned toward the console, typing fast, rewiring systems that hadn't been used in years. Old turrets along the surface hummed to life, their barrels rising from the dust. Lyra stared in awe. "You can still make them work?" Ethan grinned faintly. "I used to fix war machines, remember? This one's just a bigger toy." The Syndicate commander, Core, watched from his ship orbiting the moon. His red eyes flickered as he issued orders. "Surround the base, no one leaves alive." He turned to his second-in-command. "The girl must be taken alive, the human. Dispose of him." Back inside, Ethan adjusted the shields around the entrance, connecting loose wires. He looked at Lyra. "You stay behind this wall when the shooting starts. No arguments, Lyra shook her head. I can help. Father taught me how to connect power cores. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. All right. But you do exactly what I say. The ground rumbled again. The turrets outside opened fire. Red and blue bolts lit up the darkness. Ethan grabbed his plasma cutter, the closest thing he had to a weapon. He moved to the defense station and shouted, "They're breaching the outer wall. Move." Lyra ran to the side panel, reconnecting broken cables, sparks flying around her. She was scared, but her hands were fast. The power surged back into the base's main core, lighting up the holographic map. Ethan saw the enemy forces closing in from 3 sides. "They're trying to corner us," he muttered. Typical Syndicate tactics. He aimed one of the old cannons from the control panel and fired. The blast tore through the nearest dropship, sending flaming debris into the crater. For a moment, the moon's surface was a storm of fire. But the victory didn't last. Dozens more ships descended, forming a circle of fire around them. Kor stepped out from one of the landing craft. His armor gleamed silver and black, the Syndicate sigil burning red on his chest. He looked down at the base entrance and smiled coldly. "Come out, human. There's nowhere left to run." Ethan could hear his voice echo through the comm system. He pressed the button and replied, "Sorry, not taking visitors right now," Kor chuckled. "Then I'll bring the door to you." He raised his arm and fired a beam that struck the entrance. Shaking the base violently, Ethan grabbed Lyra. Pulling her behind the console, chunks of metal rained down. Smoke filled the air. He coughed hard, his shoulder bleeding again, but even through the chaos, he smiled grimly. Still alive, not bad. Lyra's voice trembled. "They'll break through," Ethan nodded. "Then we make them regret it." He opened an old panel under the console. Revealing a line of spherical devices, Lyra gasped. "Are those bombs?" "Rebel charges," Ethan said. "Your father had good taste," he began, arming them one by one. "We'll bring this whole place down before we hand over that core." The outer door exploded inward, and Syndicate soldiers poured in. Their boots thudded on the metal floor, their weapons humming. Ethan fired the plasma torch, a beam of blue light slicing through the first wave. He moved with the speed of a trained soldier, every motion sharp and controlled. Lyra ducked behind cover. Clutching the disc, her heart pounded. She could hear the soldiers shouting commands. One of them spotted her and raised his weapon. Before he could fire, Ethan tackled him, slamming the plasma torch into his chest. "Run, Lyra," he shouted. She hesitated, tears running down her cheeks. "I can't leave you." "Go!" Ethan roared, his voice echoing through the metal halls. She turned and ran deeper into the base. The disc glowed brighter, guiding her toward the central reactor. Kor entered the base, stepping over the fallen soldiers. His voice echoed, "You fight well, human, but you can't win." Ethan grinned through blood. "Funny. I've heard that before." Kor swung his energy blade, the air crackling. Ethan blocked with a metal rod, sparks flying as they clashed. Their fight shook the hallway, each strike faster. Heavier, deadlier. Ethan was strong, but Kor was stronger. He slammed Ethan against the wall, cracking his ribs. "You should have stayed in your workshop," Kor hissed. Ethan spat blood but smiled. "And missed the fun?" Lyra reached the reactor room, her tears falling as the disc began to spin in her hands. It floated upward, releasing streams of light that connected with the reactor core. The machines around her started humming, screens lighting up. A deep voice, her father's AI, spoke softly. "Hello, Lyra. It's time to finish what we started." The light expanded through the base. Kor turned, sensing the energy shift. "What have you done?" Ethan coughed, his strength fading. "She's activating it." The Freedom Code. A wave of blue energy burst from the core, spreading through every system. The Syndicate soldiers froze, their armor flickering. Weapons powering down, Kor stumbled back. His armor shorting out, he glared at Ethan. "You doomed us all." Ethan smirked weakly. "No, I freed her." The base began to collapse, metal groaning as the reactor overloaded. Ethan grabbed the detonator. "You lose." Lyra ran toward him as the walls fell apart. He looked at her, his eyes soft for the first time. "You're going to live." "Promise me that." She shook her head. "Come with me." He smiled sadly. "Can't, I've got one last thing to fix." He pressed the button, and the blast swallowed everything in light. Outside, the explosion lit up the moon like a second sunrise. Kor's ships were torn apart by the shockwave. When the light faded, only silence remained. Hours later, from the debris, A small escape pod floated upward inside. Lyra held the glowing disc close to her heart, whispering, "I promise, human, I'll live, and I'll finish it." Cold silence filled the stars, broken only by the slow spin of a tiny escape pod drifting through the black void. Inside it, Lyra sat curled up in her seat, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim blue light. Her small hands gripped the toy disc, the last piece of her father's work. "The last memory of Ethan," she whispered softly. "You promised I'd live, human, and I will." The pod's power was running low, its systems flickering weakly outside. Shattered pieces of the moon floated like ghosts, glowing with fire. Ethan's sacrifice had destroyed the Syndicate base, but not the Syndicate itself. Kor's fleet had scattered, some destroyed, some escaping into deep space. Lyra knew it was only a matter of time before they found her again. Suddenly, the toy in her hands blinked. A voice came from it, faint, full of static, but familiar. "Lyra, if you're hearing this, you're still alive." Her eyes widened. It was Ethan's voice, recorded in the ship's memory system. He sounded tired but strong. "You did it, kid. You kept the light going. That's all that matters." Lyra covered her mouth as tears ran down her cheeks. The toy glowed brighter, projecting a small map, a route to somewhere beyond the known systems. Ethan's voice continued, "There's a place called Haven Station. Neutral ground. Follow the stars to Sector 9. Someone there owes me a favor." She wiped her eyes and nodded, whispering, "I'll go, Ethan." Her fingers flew over the pod's controls. Setting a new course, the engines sputtered, but they came to life. Slowly, the pod turned and began to move, leaving behind the glowing ruins of the moon. Behind her, a shadow moved, one of the Syndicate ships, damaged but still alive, following her trail. Hours passed. Stars drifted by, and exhaustion weighed on her small shoulders. She dreamed of Ethan's voice, his laugh, the warmth in his eyes when he called her kid. But when the alarm beeped, her eyes snapped open. The Syndicate ship had found her, closing in fast. "Power low," the pod's computer said. "Evasion impossible." Lyra looked down at the toy in her hands. It pulsed gently like a heart. She whispered, "Father." "Ethan, what do I do now?" The disc responded by opening, mechanical parts shifting to reveal a small blue crystal core. Inside it, light danced like a storm. A message appeared in alien script. "The light protects the innocent." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then let's see if it still works." She placed the core into the pod's control socket. The entire system came alive, glowing with energy that seemed too much for its size. The pod accelerated, streaking through the stars like a comet. The Syndicate ship fired, but every beam bent away, hitting nothing. A bright shield of blue light surrounded the pod. Pure and silent, Lyra laughed through her tears. "You can't hurt me anymore." The chase lasted only minutes before the Syndicate ship exploded, its systems collapsing from the energy backlash. Lyra's pod sped away, leaving the wreckage behind. When the danger passed, the lights dimmed again, and the toy's glow faded to a calm pulse. Lyra whispered softly, "You saved me again." Human. Hours later, she saw the faint glow of Haven Station, a ring of light orbiting a giant red star. It looked old and patched together, built by many species over centuries, but to Lyra it looked like safety. She guided the pod into its docking bay and collapsed from exhaustion as the hatch opened. When she woke, she was lying on a medical bed surrounded by humans and aliens. An older human woman with gray hair leaned over her, smiling gently. "You're safe now, child," she said. "We found you drifting. Your ship nearly dead." Lyra sat up weakly. "Ethan, is he here?" The woman's eyes softened. "He's gone, dear. But his name, Ethan Cole, means something here. He once saved this station long ago." Lyra's hands trembled as she held out the toy. "He told me to come here." The woman took the disc carefully, her eyes widening. This is the Dawnlight core. We thought it was destroyed." Lyra nodded slowly. "My father built it. Ethan helped me protect it." The woman smiled sadly. "Then both of them live on in you." She handed the toy back. "Keep it safe, little one. The galaxy still needs it." Lyra looked out the window at the endless stars. She felt the warmth of Ethan's voice echoing in her heart. "You're not selling toys anymore, kid. You're building worlds," he had said. She whispered, "I will, Ethan, I promise." Outside, far away, one last piece of Kor's ship floated in silence. A faint red light blinked in the wreckage, his armor's signal beacon still active. A mechanical voice said quietly, "Target not eliminated." Continue pursuit. Somewhere in the darkness, the syndicate would rise again, but this time humanity wasn't alone because a small alien girl, once begging on a street corner under two suns, had become the keeper of a light that could change the galaxy, and the promise of one human, one stubborn mechanic, had become the spark that would start a revolution.